So this is Kafunda Banks, and I am with Conscious Teachers, and I have warmly invited my friend and someone that I know who has done so much in his community, Hajai Shira. He's a licensed social worker, a software salesman, and he's given himself a nomer that I have not heard before, but I like it: practical psychologist and scientist. And before we go into some of the wonderful things that Hajai does for his community, I want to ask him about what that means. What is a practical psychologist scientist?
Well, I have to say the practical psychologist label I actually borrowed from Tony Robbins, who was the first person that I saw use it, and I like the way that he uses it. And that Tony, if you don't know, he's just got a high school diploma. That's right. Beyond that, all he did is he studied the best brain change teachers on his own, and he gave himself that title of practical psychologist because what he's really interested in is helping people change their thought patterns in a way that allows them to be more successful in the world. And to the extent that I don't have a PhD in psychology or a discipline like that, but what I have been doing is through more traditional Western academic methods, as we sort of talked about, as well as more, non-traditional kind of Eastern sort of like woo-woo teachings that really work. That's what I'm interested in, is helping people, myself, and the scientist piece comes from, my dad was a laboratory director. So as a lab tech, he was very involved in that, kind of hard science world. And I think I inherited that from him in a way that I'm simply an experimenter. For the past 30 years, I'm 54 years old now. Mm-hmm. So since I've been at least a legal adult, and probably a little bit before that, I've just been experimenting with the thoughts in my brain, because I realized as a teenager that a lot of the thoughts I got from my family and from my society were, I'll try not to curse. I love swearing, but I'll be a little...
Let it rip. We're all adults here.
They were fucked up. The ideas that I got from a lot of the people in my world as a child and an adolescent, teachers, some family. My family gave me a lot of good ideas, but they also adopted a lot of really treacherous, unhealthy ideas from their world around them. And, when you're adolescent, and I was an adolescent in the 70s, so there's already a lot of pushing back against the rules. And as I looked at the people that I really admired, the political and the spiritual rebels, I realized that the stuff I had been handed down, everything from Thanksgiving and Christmas to to the U.S. Constitution, there was a lot of crap involved in there. So I've been trying to sift through the crap ever since, and that's a very practical way to use my brain.
So when you're saying that you've taken some elements of new thought and your desire and your passion for experimenting, and you have sort of devised in yourself a way of applying some ideology or some theories that work authentically for people, not, because there are some things that work in theory, like our Constitution, there are some very nice words and wording and, in that, but when we try to apply those things to a variable of people, sometimes things get dicey in the application. But so you sort of kind of found a way to find some ideologies that work for you specifically and for others and make it work.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned new thought, because what I've come to realize that in my 30 years of study, that a lot of the people that I admire, one comes to mind immediately, Louise Hay, is sort of a second or third generation new thought teacher. Like, she was influenced by a lot of the more traditional, new thought. And I know that new thought is even sort of, has a certain vagueness, but I know that there's a whole school and even kind of church around new thought and teachers that come out of that have influenced. And the other person, I think, who's somewhat out of that tradition, not Marilyn Ferguson, but the woman, her name will come back to me, who wrote Return to Love, Marianne.
Oh, Marianne Williamson.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think she was heavily influenced by that, by the New Thought School as well, too, as well as the Michael Beckwith, right?
Yeah,
He's
the Agape Church in California.
Yeah, so Agape Church. So I think that there's a lot of good in there, but outside of Michael Beckwith, I think the thing that gives that causes me to continue to experiment with the New Thought teachings and teachers is that, you know, as an African American man who grew up in, you know, in urban Boston, it was the New Thought teachers were sort of they didn't exactly fit in.
Right.
The Christian, Muslim, Nation of Islam, like the black aesthetic. So it took a while for me to sort of incorporate that into, and I'm still working on how do you as a person of color adopt stuff from, you know, from India and from Europe and from offshoots of, you know, U.S. Mysticism and psychology that can then fit into a community that's been, you know, extremely traumatized and is not trusting of anything that's like smacks of non-Christianity. Right.
And that's an important thought right there. And I think that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you, because I knew that you did this group or this meeting of men on a weekly basis, and they are primarily men of color.
Yep, all black and brown men.
Right, all black and brown men. And you have this way of helping them to sort of unpack all of these issues that you just spoke about. And so, you know, that's kind of one of the reasons why I invited you to talk with me, because I'm really interested in, as I said, conscious teaching, you know, being aware of what is facing us today and how we go about our daily lives, impacting people in a thoughtful, intentional kind of way. And ultimately, that kind of thought and intent leads to healing. And you've done that quite deliberately with this group. And, you know, as you mentioned, our community, people of color, we definitely need this healing. We definitely need to kind of come home to ourselves, have a sense of authenticity about ourselves, and be able to feel comfortable and grounded enough to show up deeply rooted in our own authentic truth. And like you said, when you have a group of people who have been repeatedly traumatized, that gets very difficult to even first know what truth is, and then to be secure enough to walk in it, you know, on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, you as a black man, having this very unique group of men that you know, work with and impact. So tell us more about your work with this group, and how did you start, and why did you start? Because that's something a lot of people would take on.
Wow. Well, let's see. How much time do we have? The Brothers Healing Circle is so fascinating to me. And it is one of the most authentic places where I get to do my work, both my work on myself as well as my experimentation with other people. That really grew out of my work as a fatherhood practitioner / group facilitator / you know, social worker. Because for 6 years of my social work career, I did groups for dads full time. And it was based primarily on this 13-week curriculum that asked men to look at their, mostly their inner emotional life around fathering, starting with what was their relationship with their father, what did they want to keep from that, and then what did they want to pass on to that, and then looking at all sorts of, you know, not just, you know, kind of, and I know, you know, you teach a lot of, you know, young people, little people, and not just, so yes, having some idea about, you know, child development and what to expect at certain ages and stages of your child's life, but more so like getting in touch with who you are and how to be present with that child at different stages. And there were even in that kind of set curriculum, there were a couple of guided meditations.
Can I ask you a quick question as you're going on?
Sure.
Now, when you started with this group of fathers, was it an intention that the group be fathers who are separated from the children somehow, who may not be with the moms, or was it just in general fathers?
So in that work, we threw a very wide net and used fathers even in the very broad sense of the word. So it could be, biological father, non-biological father, boyfriend of mom, uncle, grandfather, anybody who was any male who was playing a parenting role, a caretaker role in that child, with a child in the family. And what I discovered in doing this is that, by that point, I started doing this in my probably mid-30s. And I had 2 youngish children. My kids were school age, I think like 6 and 9 maybe when I started doing this. And I had been studying, traditional hatha yoga, as well as some more traditional forms of bhakti yoga, devotional yoga, and meditation and chanting. And I was very deep into my own internal practice at that point. And I was somewhat egotistical, might not be the right word, but I was aware that a lot of the practices that I was involved with at that point weren't really mainstream.
Yeah, all right.
And when I started doing this work with men in the fatherhood community, and partly, and that's where I got the Salesman title from as well, because I really had to sell this group to people. It's not like there were a whole bunch of folks, knocking on the door, calling me up, saying like, I want to come to your group. Usually it was like somebody else would refer them, whether it was a big social service agency, whether it was another family member, or somebody would say like, this guy should come to the group. And then I would like cold call him and try and convince him why he should give up like 13 Tuesday nights to come hang out with a bunch of other men.
Right. This is not like going down to the bar and having a couple of drinks, and discussing the day. This is deep internal work.
This is deep emotional work. And most of the men
are not used to.
Right. And most people thought that it was, I would say the majority, probably more than half of the men that I talked to initially, certainly had never been involved in any kind of group experience like this. So it was totally different than anything else they had ever heard about, even as a man doing something like this. And it wasn't something that when they heard the idea, they initially thought like, hey, that's a good idea.
Right, exactly. Might be a good idea, but for somebody else, maybe.
Right. Like for my wife or girlfriend, that might be a good idea. But for me, I'm cool. I'm straight. I heard that all the time. I got very good at getting behind men's defenses around why they shouldn't be doing something like that. And part of it was due to just my enthusiasm for the idea. And after the very first group, I became super confident that this was not just about me, that men had profound transformational changes. And in fact, that it was even more profound than when I had already done a lot of work one-on-one with men in a kind of therapeutic setting. But this was so much more powerful because just as facilitator, I didn't have to do that work that other men, game knows game.
Yes.
So guys would come to the group, and if they, tried to kind of play some game, somebody else in the group would call them on that, and I could just kind of sit back and let stuff happen sometimes. And in fact, I know both in my own personal experience as well as with, like the, hundreds of men that I've been in groups with, that guys would say, like another man in the group could say the exact same thing that another man, say girlfriend or wife, had said to him. But when this man said it, it had an impact that the woman, when she said it, it didn't have the same impact. Right. But we could call, I realized very early on in this group sort of experience that we could call, that was one powerful thing, that we could call one another out on our shit and could hear it better, was one. but that's not so much what the Brothers Healing Circle is about. The other really powerful thing is I recognize in a group setting that when as a human being, much less a man, that as you start to tell your story and talk about what's going on for you, that you hear your own bullshit so much more clearly. And that's what the Brothers Healing Circle is about. So we discourage men calling out other men in the healing circle about like, well, that sounds kind of suspicious to me.
Yeah,
it's like we just tell our stories, and as we tell our stories in our head, our own flags go off like, well, gee, that sounds kind of suspicious to me. That sounds like bullshit when I say it. Right. But if you're talking to your partner or your kid or somebody about it, and you say something, it may not sound like bullshit so readily because you're so caught up in your own story. But we just have like 5 or 6 or 8 men like listening to you, and you're saying this stuff, and you're kind of like, whoa, that wasn't really cool what I did. And you don't need anybody else to tell you, because like most of us, the 99.5% of the people on the planet who aren't psychopaths recognize that.
Well, I mean, again, that's why I think your group, it sounds so very powerful to me. And because, again, there's that word that comes up for me, consciousness. What consciousness means for me is having a sense of self-awareness. And then when you go out into the world, you take that awareness with you, and it opens you up to new thoughts, to new alternatives and new solutions. And so when the men are talking, I'm sure it took a while for them to develop that kind of self-awareness and to be able to hear someone else's story and then be self-reflective enough to say, that sounds like the same crap I said to my wife last night, and it wasn't cool.
I disagree. It doesn't take a lot of time. It happens immediately. It happens it happens right away, because all we need, the powerful thing about the group is it just sets up this container where we're able to experience life on a deeper level than what we normally do when we're driving in traffic or sitting in our office or whatever. And so when you have a group of men, and I'll say again human beings, but a group of human beings who happen to be men and have all these socialized experience as men that we might not feel as comfortable with our emotions or with verbalizing what's going on inside of us. But then when we set up this space, when you're invited by somebody that cares about you and that you care about as well, when you show up in a circle, you're sort of like on guard is not maybe the right word, but the intensity of your awareness is already increased. When you step into the circle, there's this mindful awareness that is already there. And so not only do you listen to other men more carefully, that's the thing. And this is the thing I learned in like kind of in studying communication, is that, and I learned this with my own wife, that I often don't listen to her as well as I could, and in the group for these 2 hours a week, we listen to one another really well. Both me as the primary facilitator, as I know other men, it sets up this space where we listen. And so it's not just listening to other men, when we listen to ourselves, and that's where the magic is. And it happens very fast. The seed planting that actually gets men to come to the group, because it's like kind of traditional sales, you have to talk to 10 people to get a yes. So I invite a lot more people to the group than ever come, and I have a whole bunch of folks out there now who have sort of talked about wanting to come and haven't quite made it yet.
So let me ask you this then: do you feel that men, or at least the men who come to your group, because I'm just thinking about myself, right? And if I were in a group of,
aren't we all?
Right, it's the only place I have to start from is me. So if I were in a group of women, and women are talking and unpacking their emotional stuff, how quick would I be to be honest and authentic? And for me, I'll say maybe not so quick. I mean, I might have a desire to save face. I might have desire to maybe make me sound better than what I actually am or feeling. So I know for me, a whole bunch of defenses would jump in the way of me sharing truly. And then being self-reflective enough to say, oh, what that woman just said, wow, I just did that same fucked up thing,
Right.
like an hour ago,
Right.
So for me, that would take some time, but I'm interested. I'm encouraged and interested that you said for men that happens so quickly. So do you think it's because, is it something in the male consciousness that there's a group of you together and that, creates this, like you said, container or field where they're more comfortable or more feeling more accountable to be honest? Or is it the container of setting up a space where people feel safe enough to kind of let their guard down? And, certainly there is some power of being around people of the same gender and of your same age group.
Right.
So
let me be a little nuanced in that and say, certainly I think that there's still a lot of, game playing and obfuscation that happens in this group, even after we've been meeting for 10 years. In 1, 2, 3 different iterations. And this last iteration has been going on consistently on a weekly basis for about 14 months now, since August of 15.
And you have a core group of men who've traveled with you through these?
Yeah, so this the group with us now, which on a good night is probably 8 to 10 men, and there's a core group of 4 or 5 of us that are consistent, and then folks that come in and out, and that's it. And it's the guys that we don't see on a regular basis. I usually try and stay in contact with, and I think that, there's things where they're kind of hoping to come back, or things come up, or there's a multiplicity of reasons why guys may not be regular. So within that core group, there's still like, people aren't, I would say, like, even myself, I'm not totally revealing, but I've still shared, even, a couple of weeks ago, I shared something. Somebody said something in the group that made him feel shame. And this is kind of the idea, I don't want to say competition or one-upmanship, but somebody mentioned something that he was shamed about. And I realized that, and I forget what the theme was that night, but whatever it was, I realized that I had held back on sharing something that I was really ashamed about. And when he mentioned that, I thought, well, I'm holding this other thing, I'm going to drop that as well too.
Right.
And I don't know that it was just, and for me, it just felt like I want to be able to own the fact that I did this fucked up thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a bit. I heard John Lennon once say, when he and the Beatles were studying with Maharishi in India, the TM guru, that there was this, that even in this meditation community, there was a fierce competition, especially between the Beatles, about who was going to be enlightened first.
Right.
Which is, of course, a total oxymoron, right?
Exactly.
But I think in the group, there's a little bit of that we recognize that it feels good when and we have this container of confidentiality, with the normal sort of, safety parameters on that.
Right.
But that we want to get better. And there's this place where we know if you hold stuff, you're not going to get better. I've heard, guys in the group make these disclosures even early in their, in their participation in the group, where it was kind of like, wow, that was a bombshell.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you feel like people have been holding this for a long time with years to take it. And the other thing about this is, even though this is it's even healing is in the title, so it is a real, and we don't do much physical work, so it's really about psychotherapeutic healing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that some of these men, some of us talk about having used traditional psychotherapy, in other settings. But for the most part, I think many of the men in the group don't really go into for traditional kind of one-on-one psychotherapy. And I think in many ways that this is more powerful too, because we're all committed to growing, and even in that kind of more clinical setting where there's the sort of this, shield up between, client and therapist.
Yes.
And, we're all kind of letting it hang out, and it works. And again, after 10 years, I've gotten a lot better in holding this container, and even in sharing the leadership of holding this container. And more so, I just know people, I'm not the only one who's psyched about this. Like, every time people come, they're like, this is fantastic. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Right.
It really is.
One thing that you said that kind of impacted me is you said that you have this safe space, and, people will say things that they have been holding, maybe say it for the first time, that they've been holding for years.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking that maybe some of the readiness to be real and authentic is about putting that baggage down, that it's been so heavy, it's been weighing on them, and to finally have a place among their peers where they're feeling safe enough and confident enough to let it go and it be okay.
Yeah.
That has, an impact and maybe some sort of motive to helping people be more authentic, that they get to feel lighter, they get to put it down, whatever it is,
It's so true. And that's what I understood from doing the fathering groups, which were a much more structured environment. But even in that people came and you put stuff in the middle of the circle, and you didn't have to pick it up again when you left. And it was the group sort of transmuted that into some different kind of energy. And when you left, you could feel better about yourself. Right. And that's what happens every week. People come and you dump stuff, and you don't have to pick it up, or certainly you don't have to pick it up in the same way with the same sort of toxic shame that may have been associated with it when you threw it down. And, and certainly as men of color. And the other reason I've been thinking a lot about this, it sort of grew organically as a group of, that was exclusively, people from the African diaspora.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that, and I think at some point as we continue to grow this, there'll be a space for the core membership and even the growing, membership of this group to meet with, men of different, kind of cultural origins, and, and women, and to, look at stuff around, around LGBT issues or issues of class as well. Right. And all those other intersectionality grids. But for men of color to be able to come and do this work where there is this sort of just overlay of racism, those of us who've been both, privileged by sexism and oppressed by racism, how do we play that? Because as Black men, there's no, there is denying, and you can choose to deny that, as a Black man, that there's any privilege to being a man about that, because, Black men may, is, been emasculated, that, that being appearing more dangerous to the white power structure, that we took certainly a bigger hit on our masculinity than other men. But does that mean that Black men don't have this role of power over with Black women? Exactly,
right. There is still that power of being a man, right?
There is, but that, so that's it, and that's not something that's something that Black men and women have certainly struggled over since before I was born. Right. And haven't come to, in many cases, a real good solution around that. So I think as a group of men of color, and that's different. That dynamic is different than white men in a healing circle would have to deal with white women, because that's, again, you sort of take racism off the table, and gender becomes a more stark experience.
Right. And I think, again, like, you made another important point, and I've read your paper, and I'd love to include a link to it with this interview. But there are certainly lots of male groups out there, nowadays, but not ones that may specifically or are tailor-made to address the issues that are specific to Black men. And so, there are the larger issues of being a man in the society, and having to present and be a certain way that you may not be feeling internally. But then there are those unique layered upon issues which incorporate racism,
Right.
that impact Black men differently. And so therefore they need something different in order to help them feel better in their skins and
Mm.
to operate in our world in a way that's authentic to them. And that's why I think your group is a unique calling to that, to kind of address those specific needs and give people safe spaces to talk about them. Certainly there's a lot in the press lately about, Black men in the police and, what it means to be in our society as a Black male, and to be looked on as a threat.
Mm.
And knowing within yourself that you present nothing threatening to anybody. So, how do men, move forward with that acknowledgement and live everyday, normal lives like everybody wants to, So.
And that's also it pulls up some of the metaphysical notions that I ascribe to that we may not necessarily deal with in this group per se, in the Brothers Healing Circle, but they're things that I ruminate on in my kind of quieter, more esoteric moments, which is and I do believe that we chose our life. Right.
Yeah.
And not just, like the decisions that we make in life. I can certainly conceptualize this idea that before we come to Earth,
yeah,
right, we choose.
I would have chosen to be taller, so I don't know.
Well, I hear you. So, like, why did why did I choose to be 5'8" instead of 6 foot?
Right.
Why did I choose to be this complexion instead of a little, darker, so it's more clear where I stand? Why did I choose to be skinny? Why did I choose all these things? And even my parents, like the kind of the pros and the cons of growing up with them, compared to looking at other people in my world, like who got parents who might have got who out of the gate had more maybe deficits than I did. Mm-hmm. So and this I don't want to go too far afield with this, but I think it is something that's relevant. That the physiology that we have, if we could choose our families, if we could choose our life, our biological life, where we came in, what would that mean to us? And maybe it is just a story that we tell ourselves that if you could choose anything you want. Because if you think about, I think about some of the biggest heroes, two of my big heroes, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who were both born slaves.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And kind of Sam Douglas, who you never hear about because he never left. And I'm not saying that's really his brother, but Frederick Douglass' brother, but somebody who just stayed there. But those of us who were born with greater pressure on us, maybe it makes the diamond even brighter.
Well, I agree. I mean, not to go too far afield either, but I really think that, us as conscious beings on the planet, what the real fight is about the right to create.
Yes.
In whatever aspect that you bring to the planet. And there is room enough on this planet. I mean, I feel that that's why the planet was created. It's a big playground. It's a big hologram. It's a big, this diadem in being able to function and move and create something unique and to have it be part of the big sandbox that everybody else is a part of. But if somebody's trying to dominate part of the playground, or if there are bullies on the playground, it sort of, pushes away other expressions or forces that there be just this one particular expression or perspective, on the planet. So I think that is sort of the deeper fight, coming to the planet in all these different expressions and ethnicities. It's about our right to create and be here however we show up.
Right. So somebody, and that right to create is so, is so fundamental and is so important. And after the fact, when we look at somebody like, a Muhammad Ali, or, or Bob Marley, or, or Prince, or Nina Simone, who did something with their lives as this artistic expression of their humanity, their biology and their psychology, and they created something that was so magnificent that when we look at it, we're kind of like, well, of course they had to exist. Like, of course there had to be somebody like that. But those were all decisions that they made at different points. Like, Muhammad Ali could have just went to the army and did an Elvis and just, did some, fake fighting and all that stuff. He didn't have to join the Nation of Islam. He didn't have to do any of that. But he made these conscious decisions. He didn't have to think if he didn't get up and go, and go jog and go to the gym every morning at 6 o'clock, he'd be, flipping burgers at some time. But he made all these decisions that created a life that we would all admire and want to live. And that's what I'm just trying to do, is like take this people glory that I've been given and make it like memorable. And then have fun along the way, because I'm not interested if it's not fun.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I totally feel that. Yeah. When a person is truly grounded in their truth, and they have the stubbornness of being to not be moved away from that, and they operate in that, and they express that with the way that they live, the way that they speak, the way that they are, that has a powerful sort of ripple effect.
Right.
It touches us all, because that authentically, I feel internally, that's how we really believe deep down in ourselves how life should be.
Right.
We should be able to have that strength of power to live life in a way that feels right to us.
Right.
When someone's out there doing that, it's like, whoa.
Yeah. We all love it. We all love it. And if we're really just, writing our own book or making our own movie, every story needs a powerful antagonist. You need somebody like, the U.S. Army, a U.S. government, or slavery, or or your crazy boss at work, or whatever it is that makes you that is the counterpoint to your magnificence, so that you have to have something to overcome. And so I think there is a sort of opportunity, minimally, to having like a lot to overcome, because then because then there's this thing like if they could do that, if they could overcome this oppression or that oppression or that shadow or that negativity, it just makes the success at the end so much more glorifying. Yes.
And that, again, getting back to your group and your circle, I think it's so important that people have that space to be their real true selves. I get so upset with the entertainment industry that I feel like have hijacked the image of us. And so we get shown these images, these, caricatures that have nothing to do with who we are internally. I mean, some of them are funny, okay, fine, ha-ha, hee-hee. But, they get thrown at us so repetitively, in a trance-like way, and broadcasted across the globe.
Right.
We all know how stimuli impacts people. When you've been shown a particular type of stimuli repetitively, it starts to take root into your consciousness.
No doubt. No doubt. And when I think about that, I just think of like, in the 1920s, I think about, the media when it first started to, broaden its tentacles. We had, Amos and Andy on like one side of the black sort of expression. And then, and Paul Robeson was operating the world at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, who do we remember more, Paul Robeson or Amos and Andy?
Right.
And certainly Amos and Andy, they get in people's heads, and those, kind of negative caricatures exist there. But, and that maybe is the other big secret, is like, what do we choose to focus on?
Right. Yeah, what do you choose to focus on? What are your true values? What are your, what is your unique perspective about how you fit into your society, how you and your family fit into your society, and how are you and your family going to operate, at large. Like, I think that is truly an important thing for people, particularly people of color in this day and age, is to be more reflective about what our values are and how they influence us. And when we go out into the day-to-day world, when we meet things or engage with things that do not reflect your internal values, do we have the strength of courage and authenticity to turn away from that? That is not who I am. I'm not going to engage in this. I'm not going to conversate with this. I'm certainly not going to pay for this.
Right.
I'm not going to watch this. Do we have that kind of sense, about ourselves? I think in so many ways, and people in general, that we come to this point where we like to be told what to think. We like to be told what to believe. And so our abilities of critical analysis and our ability to really think for ourselves have been hugely impaired.
Right.
And then we get what we get, thrown at us, and we're so conditioned that we accept it. We don't push against it or, make any movements that are different. And that as a people and people in general is a dangerous place to be, which to me is reflective of what's happening in the election right now. But, this is not a cool place to be, as a person. So, again, like these groups that you're having, people being conscious, people being aware, people thinking, people uniting their heads and their hearts and operating, in the world in an authentic manner.
Right.
That is critical today. We have to make that connection.
Yeah, we do need, and the groups are valuable not just because they're a transformative psychological experience, but because, we need a tribe.
Yeah.
I know that we've talked before about this idea that in a lot of the, New Thought or meditative or yoga circles, as a African American person, a person from the African diaspora, we often feel a little, kind of out of place.
Yeah.
And I know, and there have been many times in my life when I just wished like I could give up all this stuff and just become a Christian.
So much easier.
Oh, I wish I could just like drink that Kool-Aid and just be done with it at my little community there and not, think about all the contradictions in the Bible or the contradictions in how we got the Bible. I can't do that.
But we could have a whole conversation about that, because all that stuff that you just mentioned has nothing to do with the Bible. It has to do with the people who had something to do with the Bible. But anyway, I will hold that thought.
So I'll just say, in terms of community, that's one thing that I often that I enjoy about the Brothers Healing Circle, and when I have been involved in churches in our community, where that's something, just the fellowship, the connection with other people. And if I don't think too deeply about it, it feels good. So for me, the Brothers Healing Circle and what I can envision growing out of it, and the Brothers Healing Circle, we have men who are Christian. There have been men who are Muslim in the past, none right now that I know of, and men who are atheists, and men who are, just so it's not a big deal for them. And the nice thing about it is that there's no overarching mandate for the group that you have to believe this or have to believe that. We just want people to come and be, honest. And it's not about evangelizing or changing anybody's mind. People personally, I consider that insulting personally for me. I know what my values are. I know where I stand. I don't, I don't think because you're at the, T station at 7 a.m. that you necessarily have a better hold on the reality of the world than I do.
Right. What? Wait a minute. First of all, I'm at the T station at 7:30 a.m. Okay.
Are you recruiting for a particular belief system?
I am not recruiting for anything. Listen, it's all I can do to keep me together. I can't worry about what everybody else is.
I was referring to the folks who are there recruiting for a spiritual, psychological.
Oh, yes, they're handing out their pamphlets and their
those folks
and whatnot. Those folks, right? No, I don't knock anybody who is trying to make some sort of positive impression. Really, I think I believe what the scriptures say in Corinthians about the letter of the law was written in our hearts. So I think that people who have a normal sense of, psychology, there are those people who do not, we all kind of internally know when we're messing up or when we're doing something wrong, or when we're doing something that's contributing to our tribe or, our world at large. We pretty much know that. And we have a sense when we've ran afield of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the law is written into our hearts, and I believe that if we are operating in line with our our true authentic selves, we kind of know that. And there are a whole host of issues, psychological, emotional, and otherwise, for folks who've ran way far afield of that.
Which is that reminds me. Well, again, is the piece. So the Brothers Healing Circle is a big piece of what I do. The other piece that's important to me, and that not only do I, and I think maybe in my more teaching moments, like the Brothers Healing Circle is one of my facilitative moments, but when I'm more in the mode of a teacher, if there's anything I can encourage more than even and I think there's a lot of good books. I'm a believer in scriptures and messages being passed through generations, but I'm much more a believer in, I don't want to call it meditation or mindfulness, but let's just say quiet self-reflection.
Sure.
Because I think in those moments you recognize, it's in here and in here, and when you're closer to it, when you're farther away from it. And I think that the busyness and fast pace of our society now draws people away from that. So taking a few moments a day to, just kind of be quiet and reflect on what's happening in your life and where you want to go to, reminding yourself of what your vision is. Yeah. Certainly, I think there's a lot of beautiful things in scriptures from around the world. And, and one of the most beautiful in the Bible is this idea, without a vision, the people will perish.
Right.
And I know that a lot of us have lost a vision, both individually as well as collectively. Yeah. And so for me, having, a vision is sort of like having a dream, with a deadline. I know I've heard that around, a goal. So it's just like, what is it that you really want to do in life that gets you, that gets you excited, that makes you want to get up and learn something new and share something with the world. Yeah. And that we all have gifts. We all have those things inside of us, those talents that we can develop even more. Yeah. And, again, I go back to, sort of Prince and Muhammad Ali that may have been born with some intrinsic skills. But if those people don't work real hard, discipline is something that I've learned, later in life. I was not a very disciplined person as a young man or youth. And so for me, learning how to, sit myself down and do what I say I'm going to do has been enormously practical again. And there's these little, kind of tricks and teases I have to do with myself. Just, I'll sit for 5 minutes of meditation because I'm rushed. I don't have a lot of time. And if I sit for 5 minutes, it becomes so delicious.
Yeah.
I want to stay for 20 or 30 just because it feels good,
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing. Like I wrote down a couple of things that you said. And then, you said about sitting down and meditating and being with yourself, for 5, minutes or so, and being able to be self-reflective. And I think what's really important for our community is, and for people at large, that when we are having that space of self-reflection, in order for it to be really practical and good, you also have to have the inability to hear the truth about yourself. Because in that space of reflection, it's the difference between people who meditate to deflect and deny, and then the people who are really trying to evolve. Because, you're going to, in that space, people busy themselves intentionally because they don't really want to think. They don't really want to hear, So we have to have that courage in ourselves to be truthful about what it is that we may come up about us that may not be that pleasant, that we deal with, And then you talked about, gifts that we all have. And again, why I think it's so important for us as a community. And we talked about this before. There are some wonderful groups out there. People are doing some wonderful things as far as spirituality and intention and all of that. But those things don't necessarily address things that are specific to people, of color. And it's important because, as you said, we all have gifts. We were all born to contribute something positive to our society. But if you don't have the space to give that gift, if you don't have the freedom to open that gift, it's like being given, a Tiffany ring, and it's inside of a box, and you never in your lifetime have an opportunity to open the box.
That's sad.
How painful, right? How painful. And yet that is the space that many of us are in. And so that's why I feel like these groups like yours and some others that I can think of, they're so important, because we have to have the space to open our gifts and to be contributors. It's important, and, you said about discipline. Yeah. That's very important. I mean, if you don't have discipline, you don't have anything. You're not going to get too far, right? You can have all the intention and all the love you want, but if you don't have the tenacity to stick with it, it's for naught. So, and very important stuff. Yeah. I think I cut you off at some point.
I'm stuck on this image I'm stuck on the image of somebody having a Tiffany ring or egg or a Fabergé egg. That was what I was seeing. But the really valuable gift in a box and not having the time to open it. And I think
not just the time. I mean, not even the right or the space to open the box. Because when in our society, when we're met with racism and we are wanting to create in our world and we're wanting to do things in our world and doors are being slammed in our faces, you are not given the right to open your box. And that's why I think that these foundations or these circles or any avenue where people of color create space for each other, why they are so profoundly important, because we give people the space to open up.
And again, at the time and space and the right to open your gift. Did I miss anything there? Those are sort of...
No, let me look. No, you got it off. Yeah.
Because I don't know, and I'll go back to Harriet Tubman, where nobody else can give or take away your right to do that.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah.
So, like, if you even in the most, and certainly we could agree that her situation was more.
You might get shot trying. Let me just be.
What?
You might get shot trying. Let me just throw it out there. Be real. Okay.
Right. So again, I think, the shackles that are, psychological chains now that prevent you from opening your box. And certainly it's an apt analogy. It's a powerful analogy that we all have this gift and it's inside of us. It's not out there. There's a gift inside of us that for multiplicity of reasons, we as an individual, I as an individual might feel like I don't have the right or the power, let's say that. I don't have the power to open my gift. And what I think when I'm in my better, when I'm clear about it, is that that's an illusion. We do have the power to open it up.
You do. And okay, so let me add another word, the platform to open your gift. So okay, let's just go back to one ridiculous situation I thought.
Yep.
The Oscars. Oscars so white, right?
Right.
So there are a lot of fabulous, talented actors out there. They don't get a lot of, recognition for their work. And so that movement came about. But my thought of that was, and if you in your heart, your passion, your gift is to act, and the only roles are available to you are slave, maid, gangster, so that's sort of encroaching and sort of stifling that gift that you have. And my issue with that whole thing is that how long have we known that there is not a place for that diversity in the mainstream? Mm-hmm. And how many people of color have money in that industry to create platforms where those gifts could be expressed? So why even bother? Do you know what I mean? I mean, eventually they'll catch on and understand that, it's marketable and, to everybody's benefit, that there is a forum for that, but they haven't gotten there yet. So why are we waiting for them? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's what I mean. No, yes, of course you can open your gift. You have the power and the right. You have the God-given right.
Right.
And so, again, going back to representation and things that you do and other people do, I think it's important that we create platforms where people can do those things.
Right.
They have an expression, they have a place. There are some folks out there, who are doing some things, but they don't get enough attention and recognition for it. And so in some ways they may not. I'm glad they exist, mm-hmm. But it would be great if other people knew that they existed and supported them, so that those platforms could get larger and they could support more people.
I do agree with a lot of that. And the thing that it reminds me of is the necessity to have money on this planet. Because certainly the big money in acting is in Hollywood, and that's why people want to get there, because, you can get the, $1 million contracts and $1 million homes, and you can have the lifestyle when you're there. And do you remember, there's a book, it's a famous book it's a white coming of age story, where this very privileged white kid kind of goes crazy and,
no. What story was that?
I'm not describing it well, but it's a kid at a prep school, and this is like Caulfield. Okay, so this kid, the basic story is this kid is at a private, elite private prep school. His parents obviously have a lot of money, and he sort of becomes unraveled and goes through this, nervous breakdown. It's sort of described there because he's questioning the underlying values of his community and culture. But the kid, so he's in high school, and his older brother is in his early 20s or something, and he goes off so he's a writer. He's a really good writer. The kid admires him, but he goes off to Hollywood and becomes a successful screenwriter out there. And I'm thinking like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because it's like that, but it's not that.
I'm trying to think, like I'm scanning, like what could this possibly?
Yeah, and I don't have it around here. I think I gave it away or something. Uh-huh. I've read it a long time ago, but Holden Caulfield is the protagonist's name.
Okay.
But he describes his brother going off to Hollywood, becoming really successful, as like selling out and prostituting himself. Like he's taken great talent that he and he's gone and sold it to, the writers, remember the Dick Van Dyke Show, and they had those talented writers, and it's like that. So I think that certainly, that we want to make money. Everybody wants to get to, sort of the NFL, the NBA, and the epitome of their field.
Yeah.
And that's important. And there's also something to be said for just the fun in playing the game, the fun in acting.
Right, exactly.
Expressing ourselves.
Yeah.
And I hope to be able to do my teaching at a much higher level, so I can just support myself in a much more, lifestyle just from the stuff I love to do.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to stop doing it.
Yes, no, and no, I totally hear you. Yeah.
But there is this, I hear you, like I want to be celebrated by the world just for kind of just digging into my box. And I feel like my box is kind of open and I'm still kind of looking around like, see.
Well, I think that
like, get your box out of here, kid.
No, but when I'm talking to you about these things, I feel like I'm looking backward and forward. So, you are speaking here as a man in the 21st century, a man of color, in the 21st century, who has a certain amount of freedoms.
Yes.
And those freedoms were obtained by folks who came before you and I. And certainly, I have a freedom that my parents didn't have, or that their parents certainly didn't have, and their parents definitely didn't have. You know what I mean? So, no, yes, as a society and as a people, we've come a long, long way. And, certainly, there are those people within our history who have played the game well.
Yeah.
Who have overcome despite all sorts of things. I mean, I had read something about Obama and why people were so mad, about his presidency and him being a man of color, because he took the political game and he played it well. Very, very well. And he's still playing it very well.
Yeah.
People are pissed. Their game and showed them, oh, you want to play? Let me show you how to play.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The Michael Jordan of politics.
Yeah, exactly. The Michael Jordan of politics made it all the way to the big house. So, no, there is a certain, I'll even use Trump's, book title. There's the art of the game, There is definitely that artistry. And again, that to me is about creation and being able to create. Effectively being able to identify the game and play it well, be a master of the board. And that's an important place to be, or a skill. But, I think also too, there are people who have yet to understand what their personal artistry is about and how to express that in a very, diverse and colorful way, in the way that it was meant to. And I think that, people who are walking authentically in their power are sort of leaders, again, conscious teachers about, I may not know about how to instruct students, but if you can watch me and learn something, then, you go for it, And, I think of people like Muhammad Ali, certainly he was trying to impact his people, but he was living his own life,
Yes.
And if you can get something from this, then, more power to you.
Well, that's something that really strikes a chord for me as well, too, that we have to be willing to break rules. Or you're never going to be able to live your own life, because again, just a lot of the rules that we've been given are shabby. They don't work anymore. Maybe they never worked. And if you're somebody who's committed to just playing by all the rules, all the time, I don't know that you can really be authentic. So I'm willing to test those rules and see what, because there's a sort of, rule custom, certainly I'll say in this case, that, that men aren't going to come into groups and talk about their personal life.
Right.
And I'm willing to push against that. And in pushing against it, I found out that it was a fable, and that that men really wanted to do this.
Yeah.
So, and just there's a lot of other rules that I think are equally dubious that I've got my eyes on as we move forward.
Well, should we schedule a second interview now? Do you realize we've been talking for like an hour and 15 minutes now?
Wow.
Oh, an hour and 20 minutes.
It's been fun. It's gone fast.
It has gone fast, and I really hope I'll be able to upload all of this because I think there is a cap on the time. So
okay.
we will see. But this has been a pleasure, Hajai. Thank you so very much for your time and for your skill and for your conversation. And I really appreciate you as a person who is operating in this world to not only be your own authentic self, but also who is okay with encouraging others to, get to that place as well. It's a true jewel to have among us. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Kafunda. I admire you, love you, and I admire this project. So I look forward to seeing it come to more fruition.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.